Hi everybody, this is an interview with Bob Godglick of Considerate Done Vintage Clock Repairs. So Bob, how did you get into vintage clock repair?
Well, I retired a couple of years ago and looking for something to do, I wound up buying a clock at an auction, and it needed some parts. It had a couple of things broken on it, so I took it all apart, was trying to fix it, needed some parts. Called a couple of different places, but they couldn't help me, and wound up calling another fella, and he said, that's kind of a unique part to want. And I said, well, I dabble in fixing clocks a little bit here and there, and I used to do it when I was a kid, and sort of gave it up to have a career fixing cars and things like that. But so anyways, got back into it, gave him a call. He asked if he could see me, and we got together and chatted about it. He's at a point where he'd like to retire or give it up a little bit, but I would actually like to get a little bit busier. So anyways, he gave me a clock to try to fix. I took it home and I fixed it and I brought it back. He gave me another one. I took it home and tried to fix that. I fixed it and took it back to him, and then he gave me a third one, and during the course of fixing the third one, he had actually given me a text message, or sent me a text message, and said, may have thrown you under the bus a little bit on that one. It's a pretty difficult clock to fix, and at that point I'd already fixed it, and I basically said, it's ready to go. When do you want it back? From that point on, he and I have been sort of traveling together. We go and fix different things, and of course the cuckoo clock decides it's the perfect time to chime. So yeah, so that clock there came to me in really rough shape. It was missing parts. It wouldn't cuckoo anymore. The door wouldn't open. The decorative material on the top was all damaged, so I glued it all back together, put it all back together, made some parts for it, got the cuckoo working. For years, the one diaphragm hadn't even worked. When I put it all back together, instead of it just cooing, it now cuckoos. So it actually works pretty good, but that lady didn't think she'd ever get that clock back working again, so that worked out really well. But anyways, after getting together with the other fella that does the clock repair, we've been traveling together. We do service calls together, and it's been probably a year now. And it's worked really well. It keeps me busy, and he's able to sort of back off a little bit, and he doesn't have to do all of it, so it's worked out well.
Well, that's fantastic. So what's it like working on pendulum clocks?
Pendulum clocks, they're pretty much like any other clock. They're not too bad to work on. The key to a pendulum clock is making sure it's perfectly level. If it's you can fix everything on it. If the clock isn't perfectly level, it won't run. And you can actually hear them when they're out of level. They don't beat properly, so instead of ticking, tick-tock, they go tick-tock or that type of thing. You'll sometimes send the clock back with a customer, and they'll set it up, and they'll call you and say, well, it doesn't work, and then you make a house call and you just stop in and look at it, and you realize what they set it on is so unlevel that the clock will never work. So you level it up, everything works perfectly again. So yeah, it just sometimes happens that way, that it's something they're doing that's not working properly, and it's easy enough to put it back together. I like to try to drop off my clocks when I'm done with them, so I know that they're sitting level and they're set up in a proper spot and that type of thing, so it works out really well.
So do you do clocks with time zones?
I do. Usually time zone clocks are individual clocks, so usually if a time zone clock, one of them has stopped or doesn't keep track properly, it's to that individual clock. So you might have 4 or 5, 6 different clocks on a plaque or what have you, or on a wall that somebody's using 4 different time zones, and they're usually quartz clocks. They can be plug-in clocks, that type of thing, but yeah, I've done stuff like that before.
And do people often talk about their family heirloom when they're talking about the clock, like a history of how they got it?
They do, and that's usually the big story when you first get to somebody's place. There's a story about how Grandpa, brought this across on the boat, or this was passed down from generation to generation, and then they want to pass it on to their next generation. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids now, they don't really have a spot where they want to put this clock because it doesn't fit with their decor anymore. But that's a big thing. People always have a story behind the clock, so it's pretty interesting to hear some of the stuff.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to say about clock making or fixing?
So there's different types of clocks. There's pendulum clocks. There's balance wheel clocks. Balance wheel clocks are a little bit different. I've got one over here that I can show you. So a balance wheel clock, I don't know if you can see inside, but there's an actual balance wheel that's running inside there. So this is a clock that I can basically turn it upside down, I can move it around. These will keep on running no matter what. These ones actually, a balance wheel is what's used in things like nautical clocks and things like that. And nautical clocks are clocks that they'll use on ships to signify shifts for the workers that the guys that are doing the shifts on the boat. That basically, nautical clocks will chime at different times, so they'll chime on the half an hour. So somebody who's working on a boat will actually know what time it is just by the chime of the clock. So they'll know they're an hour into their shift because it'll chime twice. An hour and a half into their shift, it'll chime 3 times. 8 times is a 4-hour shift. Their shift stops. Someone else jumps in, takes over, starts over again. So balance wheel clocks, perfect on a boat because the boat's always rocking, so it will always keep time. Pendulum clocks, they basically got to be stationary. Wall clocks, again, they have to be perfectly level to keep them working properly because they're usually pendulum clocks as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Bob.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Could you tell people how to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me, either cell phone 519-897-0419, email bgdm201@gmail.com.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for taking an interest in what I do.